The Working Artist Project is brought to you by Second Line Arts Collective. Learn how you can support at secondlinearts.org.
We're creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective. Moments in time, captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Hey, hey.
What's up, everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, all right. Man, Jeanette, it's good to see you, and I'm happy to be here. And tonight we got a very special guest in the
Yes,
house.
sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
one of our I'm gonna say he is a master of jazz, a true master.
I would agree.
And I mean, it's not many people who play with Abbey Lincoln and Betty Carter, and I'm pretty sure he played with them simultaneously, which is kind of crazy. And
Yeah,
so
that was tricky. It was a bit tricky.
everybody, welcome Alvester Garnett to the Working Artist Project.
Hello, everyone. Wow, you got people here, man. Let's get an applause. That's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah, I keep him in a little box over here, you know.
Oh, that's great. Well, at least you got them employed, I hope.
That's right. But yeah, man, I want to get right to the music, and that story I gotta hear, because how do you work with two titans at the same time? Because I'm pretty sure they both have very strong personalities. I didn't know them, but
Yes.
just so tell me about that.
Well, about 3 months after I graduated, I'm going to go all the way back. I was born. No, I'm just kidding. No, about 3 months after I graduated, I get a call in the morning from Betty's manager saying that Betty wants me to come to New York City to play some gigs. It would be a couple in Brazil and one in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so I was, of course, extremely, excited about this. And I remember I was in Richmond, Virginia at my, excuse me, my allergies are kicking my butt. I just took my Claritin. Give me a second.
No worries, no worries.
And so I was at my girlfriend's apartment at that time when I got the message. did I have a cell phone? How did I even have that? How did I know? Maybe my mom called me. I don't know, whatever. And so I was so excited. I went by my alma mater, which is Virginia Commonwealth University, to tell my professors, it's like, I got the call from Betty. I'm going to be going to New York. And I told people when I graduated, I said, oh, what are you going to do now? I'm going to New York. But I had no game plan. I didn't follow the advice as well as I should have from one of our teachers, Mr. Ellis Marcellus, in terms of planning things ahead. But I had played with some folks. I had done the Thelonious Monk competition, and Betty had heard me there. And so Ora Harris, her manager, calls me up leaves a message, and I call her back and I communicate, I'm coming. I will be there, of course, So right. Later that evening, after going to VCU and telling them I'm so excited, I get a call from Michael Bowie, Abbey Lincoln's bassist, saying that Abbey needs a drummer also. And so I was like, yeah, okay. He told, and I remember speaking to, I guess it was Jim Lewis, Abbey's manager. And I knew that the dates, nothing was conflicting. Things were going to be happening literally a week after I played with Betty. I'd be working with Abbey. And so I would be in Brazil for 2 days with Betty, then Ann Arbor. I come to New York, my new home, which I didn't even know was going to, of course, if I wanted to be my new home, I was going to come back to New York for a week and then go to Istanbul with Abbey. And this is all like before even stepping foot in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I took both gigs. I remember Greg Hutchinson's advice. He was like, bro, you can't do both. If you do not let Betty know. And my attitude was like, well, first off, Betty's was just an audition initially. Okay. So I knew at least I had some clearance in that regard. And, but flash forward about a month after coming to New York and playing with both of them, a week apart, Abby's like right off the jump. She's like, you got the gig. I just remember her at that first rehearsal in her apartment, after we played something really up tempo. I think it was I Got Thunder and It Rings, and she was like, he ain't nothing but the Dickens. I never forget that. Just like it made me so happy. And so I was, on the road in Europe. This must have been like September, October of '93. And one of the performances was a triple bill with Abbey's band, Dee Dee Bridgewater's band, and Betty's all-star group with Jack DeJohnette. And so, mind you, I've already played with Betty that first little run. And I'll remind me to back up and tell you the story about playing tight with her for the first time. But this is now, we're on the road, and Michael Bublé comes to me and he says, hey, bro, so Betty says she's going to go with the kid, and I was like, huh? Yeah, man, she told me she's going to use you for her next drummer. And I was like, wow, she didn't say anything to me yet, but I'm on the road with Abbey, and now I'm hearing this story about Betty wanting to use me too. So I'm really excited, of course, and I'm sitting there and I'm hanging out with Hutch, and he's acting a fool too in the theater. There's other stuff I can't even talk about, but he was hilarious. I just had a ball hanging around him. And so, Abbey went first. I remember that much because Abbey always wanted to go first. She didn't like to go last because she knew if you go last, then you're at the whims of whoever's in front of you. So she went first. Dee Dee went second, and everybody was throwing down. Dee Dee sung her butt off, and I remember sitting at one point, Betty was standing in the theater. I was standing next to Betty, and I was like thinking to myself, "Oh my goodness, she's going so long. She's cutting into Betty's time." And Betty was just like, she's just like, I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect, she's just loving it, So you could see that Betty was just, rooting for her. I thought that was really beautiful. And then, so after the show, after Michael tells me this stuff about Betty, going to choose me, I see Abbey too. And she's like, so Vess, I know what you're going to do. Like even Abbey knew, like somehow it got to Abbey and I hadn't even heard it. So I know what you're going to do, Vess. I understand. But mind you, at that time, if you look back, a lot of cats that went into Abbey's band came through Betty's band. It's like Betty would form you and shape you. Sorry about the train. I live near the train. You're going to hear the Susquehanna freight in a second. But and so, there was like, Betty, of course, she's a proving ground, a training ground. She I mean, it's kind of like being in boot camp, she can kick your butt and then rebuild you, And so later on that night, after she had done her performance, Jack DeJohnette is there, and I was like, wow, there's Jack DeJohnette. I was kind of shy then, and Jack had judged me in the Thelonious Monk competition, so I think he might have kind of had a small glimmer of remembering me, but maybe not, because he's Jack DeJohnette. He's heard a ton of great drummers because he is one of the greatest drummers. And so Betty's like, so have you heard the news backstage? I'm like, I haven't heard anything from you yet. She said, well, give me a call. And I was like, oh, okay. She said, why don't you come up to my dressing room and meet Jack? I was like, cool, great. So that was Jerry Allen, Jack, and who was the bassist? You know who I'm talking. It'll come to me. I'm like, oh, Dave. It was Dave Holland, right? Dave Holland. Oh. And so it was insane. The band was just ridiculous. And so I go up to the dressing room, and Betty's like, Jack, I want you to meet my next drummer, Alvester Garnett. And I'm like, she hadn't even said anything to me. That's how fast she was and how confident she was. Because, she's Betty Carter. It's not many people that turn down Betty Carter. Correct. We've heard some stories of people deciding to leave, on their own terms. And I dig it. It's not for everyone. But, of course, she knew. She knew I was young. I was green. And I was like, oh, Mr. DeJohnette, So then I get back from Europe after touring with Abbey, and Betty calls a rehearsal. Mind you, the first gigs that I did with her, that audition little pocket of 3 gigs, that was with Cyrus Chestnut and Larry Grenadier, which was like, Cyrus was like a hero to me, and Larry was such a great musician. And it was Cyrus and Chris Thomas. And so, those cats, they had this thick, meaty way of playing, and that was like right up my alley, because I was like, at that time I was listening to Christian McBride and Branford records. You're in college and you're like, these are like those young lions that you're aspiring to be like, and those are your heroes. And hearing Cyrus, I heard that first record with Clarence Penn, who was my former classmate. So I learned a lot from Clarence too. So I'm like, you know, because Ellis was there too. That's another story, but I don't want to digress too much because we got time to talk. How long is this going to be? 2 hours or what? let me stop because you can see I can talk. But anyway, so back to my story about going from the audition band to now the new band is Jackie Terrison and Larry Grenadier, and Betty called a rehearsal. And so at this point I had talked to Hutch. He heard about it. Clarence knew. And because Clarence, I came in right behind Clarence basically. And they were like, man, you know, we know you're doing stuff with Abbey too, you know, and I had stuff in the books and I'm looking at these dates that Aura has handed to me. And I'm like, oh man, in the future, they don't overlap. I can make this happen, you know? And cats are like, bro, if you do it, don't tell them. Do not tell Betty. And I was like, I started looking at some of the dates and I realized literally they were like a month apart in some of the locations. And one of the locations would be Yoshi's, the old Yoshi's over in Oakland. Mm-hmm. And Aura Harris, Betty's manager, lives in San Francisco. So I knew it wasn't going to, like, if I did both, it wasn't a matter of me I could have just told no one and then I show up and then they see it on the bill. And then Aura goes and reports to Betty, of course, because she's the manager. That's what she should do. And so I was like, you know what? I'm brand new. I got an apartment to deal with, you know, rent and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to be honest. You know, I'm thinking, okay, you know, I'm going to tell her. I told Aura, and Aura's like, that's fine. Perfectly fine. That's okay. You know, just let us know what you have, you know. And I was like, oh, this is going to work. But little did I know. So I go to that first rehearsal now, mind you, with the new band that she's chosen. And I just remember showing up and I was like, there ain't nobody here. And it's just Betty, you know, she opens up that door and, you know, she's short. She's like about 5 foot or something. And I'm looking down and I'm only 5'7", mind you, but still she's looking up at me like, you need to choose. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? You need to choose. What do you want to do? You know, and I was like, well, I want to be with you. Well, you need to choose. And I was like, okay, because I never said, you know, I knew what she wanted to hear, you know, and I didn't say it because I wasn't about to do it, man. I was like, maybe I was greedy, maybe I was foolish, you know, wanting to do too much, but I also had bills, you know, and right. You know, yes. And those days of like retainer, those days were long gone. I heard stories about that, but 93 retainers weren't happening. And so, and I loved working with Abbey too. I knew there was be great things from both of them with different flavors. And I knew that was going to really help me. And so I went ahead and, you know, I had that first rehearsal with her. And everybody, when you come into the band, you generally have like what's called a honeymoon period with Betty. And some cats, the honeymoon period never ends. I think people like, probably like Hutch, Winard, like all them cats that just like, you know, they you know what I mean? They just got a vibe about them. Like right. Even some of my other cats that I've looked up to, I've heard her, like other drummers have revealed to me, it's like, man, she was tough, you know, or like she would find little things like because she liked to see you develop, I think, as a person too. Other people might not agree, but I'm a glass is half full kind of person. As tough as it was, I saw it as character building, you know. And so she just when we went on the road, she just reamed me left and right. I mean, it was like I felt like I could hardly do anything right most of the time playing with Jackie and Larry. But I remember something really powerful one night, and we were playing, I think it was in Catalina's in LA, and she could see that it was starting to get to me. And, you know, I'm fairly jovial kind of person. And she saw that I think she saw the light was starting to dim. And she said to me, just keep smiling. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did. And it seemed like it kind of relaxed me. You know, I was able to flow a bit better. And it made me think back when I was in college and I had a chance to study at Clark Terry's Big Bad Jazz Camp. Clark, it's so many things linked here together, because when I did the Monk competition, it was because of Clark Terry. And that's where Betty heard me. Like you see, like the community is so huge and so massive. When you leave yourself open, if you have the right kind of positive attitude, you will be pulled and drawn into different things, you know. When I played with Clark Terry's, because my teacher, Scott Taylor, who was teaching at Virginia Commonwealth University at the time, decided that rather than him taking the gig, because he was the big fish in Richmond, he was the educator, fine drummer, he gave the gig to me to play with Clark Terry 2 nights at a place called Benjamin's. And that's where I met and played with Clark. And he was the one that told me about the Monk competition. I didn't know anything about the Monk competition. I was outside of the New York City scene circle. Not until, I don't even know, when I finally found a Village Voice on my campus. And I was like, this is what's going on in New York? Flipping through the back. This used to be you cats, I don't know how old you are, but I don't know if you ever heard about the Village Voice, and you could flip to the back of the Village Voice. Yep. Maybe Jeanette. Okay, I'm not going to talk about anybody's age, but
I'm from New York, so I understand.
Oh, okay. Mad respect. So you know the vibe. And so I would, see all these listings, and that was like the most exciting thing when you come to the city. You look in the back of the Village Voice, and you see, oh my gosh, there's Hank Jones at this one club. You might have Ray Brown over here. There's Ron Carter playing with his band. It's like, oh, there's Mulgrew. And he's got Tony Reedus this week, but next week's got Lewis Nash. What? It's like, you're just like, golly. And so when I played with Clark at Benjamin's in Richmond, he told me about the Monk competition. There was the first Thelonious Monk International Jazz Drums competition, which happened, I think, in 91 or 92. And I auditioned for it and I made it in. And that got me to New York, because that's where Betty heard me. That's where Curtis Lundy, I saw Curtis Lundy standing backstage, and he told me later on, he was the one, she was scoping people out. And I didn't really recall seeing her, but I recall seeing him. And years later, he told me, he said, yeah, man, I said, you got to try him, check him out, and I really appreciate that, because when I got the call for with Betty, I played a lot with the audience with Betty Carter. So I felt like by the time I got to New York and finally played with Curtis years later, I was like, bro, I already been playing with you for years, man. And I was just on Instagram a few days ago, on a Kenny Washington's Instagram page. And I was like, he was like talking, I guess, about the anniversary, or just, honoring Betty Carter and that album, the audience, and everybody was chiming in, of course, because that's a piece of royalty right there. Right. And so I was like, man, you could calibrate your metronome to that record. And I tell students, like, that's a great record to play along with all those different vibes and tempos, and that feel, and Kenny's cymbal beat, and John Hicks, And so, so now I'm out on the road, and Betty is like really tough on me, but I gotta say that, I didn't stay there that long, because I think she wanted someone that was going to be there, totally with her. And I still held on to those Abbey gigs. And I think everything happens for a reason. Of course, there's a different training I would have gotten if I stayed longer with Betty, but there was a certain essential things that I really got a lot out of. There's a wonderful video that I recorded with her. It's a Lonely House, Kurt Weill's Lonely House. I don't know if you've ever seen. I should have shared that with you guys, but that's a phenomenal, haunting video. Just that song is just, because do you know that version of Abbey Lincoln's Lonely House? You ever heard that version?
Mm-mm.
I never heard it. No.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And it's on the record. It's a ballad, but you hear, and Philly Joe is on the album playing. And what you hear the whole time on the side of his floor tom is Philly Joe for a ballad tempo going.
Wow.
The whole time. And I was like, and I don't know how I got in a conversation with her after, playing with her for a while. And she told me that on that record, see, this is the thing about Abbey, she would talk in words that would be very, like, kind of almost impressionistic and abstract, whereas Betty could tell you exactly what to play on your instrument, whereas Abbey would tell you words and phrases, and it's up to you to interpret it. And Abbey was more about telling you, and also what not to play, whereas Betty could literally tell you exactly what to play. She knew exactly certain things. And so Abby's talking to me about this, and she said, Lonely House, the story of it, she's very deep. And she said, she told Philly, I want you to play the clock in the empty house.
Wow. I knew that's exactly what was going to, my gosh.
Yeah. That is some of the heaviest stuff. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, and she would do stuff like that. Sometimes she'd be like, Vest, I want you to play the bones. And I was like, whoa, the bones, I'm gonna get that, and it started making me think of like you see those those like rattles and stuff from, maybe from Africa or Brazil, where they have like the goat toenails and stuff like that, or the cowrie shells,
Right.
And so, yeah, she would work in that kind of realm, very impressionistic, and so I got a lot out of that. And also I from Abbey, I gained a sincere and deep appreciation for respecting the song, understanding the melody, understanding the story of the song. And she never chose anything that didn't fit where she was personally right then and there at that moment. And that's how she wrote, of course. So everything was deeply personal, and she lived her life like that too. I think she, like, you could feel her heart was on her sleeve a lot of times. Like, she cared a lot, and she could be easily inspired and easily offended. And in a good way, though. It was healthy, because she wouldn't hold back. If she felt wrong, she wasn't about to deal with it. And I watched that, and I think she saw certain traits in me too, that she was happy to notice and share with me. So it gave me more confidence in myself, certain aspects of like adhering to certain principles, so it made me feel like, okay, I'm not some weird odd bird out here, because how it is. We can be kind of, musicians and artists. Sometimes we can, everybody's got their flavor, and it's certain principles that I like to adhere to. And so, yeah, that is something that I got from working with Abbey, and I think it enhanced it. But years later, I remember, after that time period, like when I was working with Betty, I came back and I rejoined her Jazz Ahead program, because that's where she first pulled me in, actually, was the Jazz Ahead program. After hearing me at the Moncton, she brought me to New York for the Jazz Ahead program. And in that first Jazz Ahead program was Greg Hutchinson, Brian Blade, Cyrus Chestnut, Chris Thomas, Adonis Rose, Teodros Avery, Aaron Goldstein. I mean, the list just goes on. It was it was insane. All these young, we're all like kids, And she brought us to New York, and she developed this camaraderie that was really, I think, really wonderful, and it allowed us to be introduced to one another. I remember literally people there, like, I'm not gonna say who it was, but this one cat, like, he just kind of disappeared because he was so in awe of the other musicians. Like, it was that kind of thing. Like, we respected each other. Like, he literally was like he kind of like collapsed for a minute, and we were like worried about him. And they said, no, he's just processing being around this kind of talent, because we're all coming from different. Some of us weren't from New York. We weren't around that kind of power and that kind of energy. And you're spending like a week or two with her, and day in and day out, rehearsing all day long. And I kind of veered off a bit, but still, it's so going back to that kind of energy, like in terms of like, I think being prepared and showing professionalism, like, I think Abbey recognized that. And later on, I remember running into Betty at clubs and stuff, like the second day, a year later, after being in her band for that, really only for like about 4 months. She was kind of ticked. She was pretty, like, Curtis Lundy told me, she was really peeved at me, and he explained some things, and it made sense the way he explained it. But I remember seeing her at Bradley's. That was one of our greatest clubs ever, I feel. And it was a bunch of us young cats that were in her Jazz Ahead. And so she's seated at a table with a bunch of them, and I come walking in. I sit down at the table, and the look she shot me, bro, ma'am, Miss Berry, the look she shot me was just like, it was like a laser just shot through me like a cannon.
Oh my
It was
God.
just like, and Cat, you could see it. The Cat's even, JD Allen was too there. He was there. He was the beginning. He was the first go around. We were all like, wow. I mean, I was just like, but I was like, I remembered her lesson. Just keep smiling, so maybe it was a test, So I was like, you know what? I'm here, and I wasn't arrogant about it. I mean, I'm more confident now, but I still, I wasn't going to leave, so I just sat there, and Cats were like, wow. And I never, for the longest time, I was thinking, man, she really hates me. She really hates me. But years later, after she had passed, and it made me remember something. There was a moment where at one of the Jazz Aheads where I had a little Suzu pickup truck, and I corralled everybody, a lot of people's equipment, and put it in my truck and got us up to the Apollo. Like, going from, I think we were going from at Brooklyn, over at Brooklyn Academy of Music, up to the Apollo. So I took all this stuff, and she was watching. I remember Betty watching me, and this is the second. This is me, mind you, after she shot me that ugly look, you know, and this is the second go around, and so she, you know, I'm like, wow, you know, she's giving me some dap, but at the same time, you know, I still had that kind of, you know, a little bit of bad water under the bridge. I had those memories in my mind, and after she passed, Aura told me, she said, yeah, when it didn't work out, she told me, she said, he's going to be just fine. He's got his stuff together. And that meant a lot to me. You know, I was like, wow. Yeah. So it just goes to show you, it's like, I know, you know, sometimes people might drug you out, but it's like, until you get in their mind, you don't know everything they think about you. You know, you can't, I mean, it's the same way with the music, even. Like sometimes you might be playing somewhere and you're like, oh my God, these people hate us. They can't stand us, you know, and then afterwards they come up to you and they're giving you dap. You know how it is, Darrian. You know,
absolutely.
You know, and sometimes that's cultural, you know, like playing in Sweden. You know, sometimes people are very reserved, but they're just being so attentive in terms of listening. It's not like, you know, it's not like playing at, you know, in Mississippi at a juke joint. You know, it's not. It's not. It's just not going to be the same. It's just different cultural experiences. And yes, you're always going to play differently based upon your surroundings. But at the same time, there's another story about Betty. I remember playing with her in LA at Catalina's, and it'd be like 1 or 2 people in the club. And she would be throwing down. That I never forgot that. That's why, for me, sometimes when people say, oh man, that audience is just killing me, or man, they're not doing it, or, you know, I'm like, man, I'm just thankful to be here, because I watched Betty Carter do it, and she didn't have but 1 or 2 people, and she gave, you know, 112,000%.
Wow.
You know, so.
Yes, yeah, I know Jeanette can appreciate all these stories because she's a phenomenal vocalist in her own right.
Okay. I've seen you somewhere. Where are you performing lately?
Nowhere lately, but
okay.
because I moved down to Charlotte for a year and now I'm back up here.
Okay. So. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I love your hair.
Thank you.
That's cool. Yeah. We got this. If I had my hair, I would say it's about the same hairline. That's a beautiful hairline. I like that.
Thank you. You know what's funny? A former boss of mine, I was getting braids. It was when I was on the road with Lauryn Hill, and I had to get braids for the show for the tour. And she told the braider, she was like, don't mess up her hairline. I was like, thank you, because I love my hairline. And she was like, so you saying that, I love my hairline. And I wanted to make sure I didn't look like my brother when I had short hair, but I don't, thank God. Amen. So yeah. But yes, thank you.
Well, I'm envious of you, because I wish I could have a hairline. So, you know, I wish I could go back to those days. I still got a little residual, but it's not, you know, I have to keep it cut close, because it is what it is. Fun ride getting here.
Right. Man,
I like that.
I was just gonna kind of go talk about Ellis.
Okay.
Just because me and you, I had no idea that you studied down there with E.
Yes.
That you had that long history with him. You know.
Yes.
And
yes,
for me,
Ellis.
I feel like he gave me my whole career. You know, he gave me my first opportunity, and so he's on my wall right now. You know, he's real special to me.
Yeah.
So I want to know what it is, what it was like for you, kind of being around a person like Ellis.
Absolutely. I owe my career to him. I owe my musicianship. I owe my first musical experience. I grew up on the south side of Richmond. My parents, dad, was chairman of the deacon board. Mom sang on the church choir, church music, and AM radio, and then whatever I could find on my own. I grew up in on the south side of Richmond, but in the white suburban area where all the black folks were basically congregated on a few streets, in the 70s. And as time went by, things became a little more integrated. But my experiences with the music came relatively late. And that was basically because of Ellis. I in my, I want to say I think it was maybe my sophomore year or junior year. So Ellis was already in town, and I knew about him because we had a wonderful jazz program at VCU where I studied with a cat named Isaac Edgerton, who was one of Ellis's students. Phenomenal drummer. And he's still, I think he's still down in Richmond. I see him on on Facebook and stuff, and he plays bass too, and he plays bass at his church and everything. And he came up with James Genus. Who else was there? It was just Al Waters. It's just wonderful. Steve Wilson, like just a killing band, like ridiculously amazing musicians. And I used to go check out that band because of Isaac Edgerton, my teacher, and he was studying with Ellis. And so Isaac, when it came time, I was like, man, I want to be in jazz band, but I wasn't even in my high school jazz band. I was in chorus. I was in chorus and in marching band after school in my freshman year. And then I think I got into stage band or concert band in my sophomore year. And it was in my junior year. I think I still wasn't even in jazz band, a jazz ensemble, but I auditioned for all county jazz band, or maybe I was in jazz too, the second tier, the beginner group. And I auditioned in my junior year, and I made it in basically because of Isaac. Like I knew how to mimic, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know really, you know what I mean? It's just like anything, it's a language, so I'm watching him and he's showing me things, and I'm working with him on my audition. I knew how, okay, you play this here. I knew how to set up and kick a band, but it's kind of abstract to me, but I knew enough to make it in.
Right.
And Ellis was teaching. And at the end of that first rehearsal, Ellis looked at us and he said, at the whole band, he said, okay, all you in here, who wants to go on to be a professional musician or study this music, late after high school and college? And I raised my hand, and one other cat raised his hand. His name is John Wynn. He's a really great tenor player. He's still down. His father is a wonderful tenor player too, and really reed player. So that says a lot, because he played the clarinet for real, so this cat could handle, he was taking care of business. And I raised my hand, and it seemed like Ellis immediately, he went straight to me with all the criticism in the world. And it was the greatest thing ever. And he made me cry. He really did. I was sensitive, and it was the best thing ever, because he said, so look at your drums. I had a Tama kit. The reason I started playing drums was watching MTV. I like Stuart Copeland. I like the Police. I saw the video, Every Breath You Take. I could see, when Pan behind the back of the kit. And I was like, oh, that's what he's doing. Mom, look. Can I take drum lessons? Sure. So that's how I figured it out, by looking at, TV, because I studied piano. My mom put me in piano early on. I was always in music. And so, when I got to Isaac, he showed me how to, audition properly, made it in. Ellis is like, man, your drums, you got this big Tama kit with the hole in the front head, that big bass drum, everything's all tuned low and sloppy. Let me see your sticks. You got some big 2Bs, not some decent 5As, big old fat, rock and roll sticks. He said, man, look at your sound. Listen to your sound, man. He said, who do you listen to? And I was like, oh, well, I have some records. I have Miles Davis, 4 and More. So mind you, this is someone totally brand new. Okay. I have 4 and More because, everybody says Miles Davis. Right. And then where I grew up, everybody loved Buddy Rich. So I also have Gene Cooper and Buddy Rich, the drum battle. And then also everyone loved Dave Brubeck. And I had Dave Brubeck, take 5. Oh, and he said, and no offense, but I mean, it's sometimes that's what happens in jazz education or just in different communities. That's all you're exposed to. You're exposed to this small little part of the music. And so he said, the Dave Brubeck and Buddy Rich, I don't fault you on that. That's just where you grew up. And I was like, whoa, I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
And he said, the Miles, you don't even know what you're listening to. Like, and he was right. Like I didn't realize, I had never heard So What in its original form at that moment. Oh, what happened? Right. She split? No. But she'll be back.
Yeah, her internet might have went out or something.
Yeah.
It's all good.
It's cool. And so, but she's missing one of the greatest stories ever. and so I'm like, okay, wow, and so he's like, you need to check out some music. And I said, well, who do I listen to? And I don't know what it was. Like, he kind of like, I don't know if maybe I was putting off the wrong kind of vibe. It seemed like he pushed away a bit. And so I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm thinking now we're going to rehearse again a week or two later. And I just bombed,
Oh man. And
so I decide I'm going to interview him for a thesis for one of my papers in some kind of social science class. I'm thinking my thesis was, jazz liberated the black man in America. I'm embarrassed to say it, but this is what I was going to come down there with, and I came to him rolling with that foolishness. And he's like, what are you talking about? He said, what? And I was like, ah. I said, well, you said to me that, and I'd managed to, like, my mom took me down to Richmond. I found his address, his office. I don't know. I called the school. I was still in high school. I called the university and found his class, his office, went down and spoke with him. He was nice enough to even let me, come in. I'm just, snotty-nosed kid. And so I said, well, you said I need to listen to some people. Who do I listen to? And he wrote this list, and I can still see the handwriting. And I can't find. I save most. I have stuff from high school, even, like I have transcriptions from college. It's stuff that people have written to me, lessons and stuff like that. But I can't find this, but I can still see it. And at the top, it had Papa Joe, Philly Joe, Elvin Jones, Billy Higgins, James Black, Ed Blackwell, Tane, Nash, Smitty, Specs Wright, Joe Chambers, the list went on and on. It was like this crazy list. Oh, and Max, of course. Max was right up there, was at the very top. And he said, you need to check these records out. Let's talk. He checked these cats out. He didn't give me records, just gave me those names. And so I went to the record store and I started, I was buying cassettes, and I got one of those MRC cassettes, which is like now Verve, is one of those 90-minute joints. So it had all that, a bunch of Clifford Brown, Max Roach stuff on there, and so I got that and I started listening. And I went back to that next rehearsal. And I just remember after like the first song, he was like, okay. That's what I remember saying that, which is good. That's, you remember Ellis, right? He wasn't going to shower you with praise. He was always, he just had a way of pulling out the best of you in you without saying a whole lot. He could say, he was so incisive. He could say just the right amount of stuff to get you where you needed to be. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And my teacher, like my next lesson, he said, man, Ellis came to me and was like, what did you show him? And my teacher said, I didn't show him that much of anything other than, he just got some records. That's it. He got some records, and so that's what I knew. I was like, okay, this is key. This is it. Yeah. This is massively key. And that was only in high school. So that's in my junior year. And I got cocky, didn't make it into All County Jazz Band my senior year, which was a great lesson. And I'm still learning these lessons sometimes, and then in my freshman year, I was in this like kind of like a summer program for like advanced kids. And so we had this opportunity to go to the university before school even started. It was open to all kinds of kids. And I remember at that program, Ellis was one of the instructors. And it was just basically like listening. It was like a listening class. And I just remember, and I remember the exact room. I can go right there in the basement at the Performing Arts Center, VCU, and I know which room it was, which would eventually become my chorus room that I would be in when I still was taking chorus all throughout college. And I just remember him putting on "So What" with that intro. Yep. Bill Evans and PC, that famous intro. And I just remember sitting there. I had my elbows on my knees. And I've told this story to other people, but you're going to hear it again too. And so I'm just sitting there, and I remember those big tower speakers, and Ellis was right in front of me. I was in the very front row. And I just remember like, whoa, like hearing those harmonies. And I'd been in chorus. I was used to hearing, sitting inside of harmonies and singing tenor parts. And I was like, wow. And then when you hear that, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when they go into that, and they launch into that swing, and you hear that cymbal of Jimmy Cox. I just remember looking up, and I was like, and I just remember Ellis looking down. Hey, he get that bottom lip. He was just like, just smiling. And I was like, I get goosebumps still thinking about it. And I knew right then it was like the bug had really hit then. Yeah. And so I'm Ellis. And then being in his rhythm section masterclass, he introduced me to the music of Ahmad Jamal, Vernell Fournier, the Poinciana grooves, like those records, man, and I'm sitting here like I was getting ready to that box set.
Oh wow, okay.
This Mosaic box set that Kenny Washington did the liner notes on. This is that Ahmad Jamal, the complete Ahmad Jamal trio, Argo Sessions, 1956 to 62. And the sound on there is ridiculous too. And I'm an audiophile, so I love that.
Oh.
But yeah, and those records, man, all those grooves, and you see how like the drums can be so compositional. You know, it's like the shapes that Vernell, how he would delineate the different sections of the song and his sparseness, and how effective he was with being so groovy, understanding color, understanding texture, and then not having to shout. You know, yes. When he needed to, he could holler when he needed to, but it was also that it was coming from this controlled environment, this lower level playing. And I remember hearing him play at Bradley's, and I was just blown away. Like, oh, wow. It was crazy how dark Vernell's drums were. Like, his tuning was really low.
Really?
By the time I heard him in the 90s at Bradley's playing trio, and I don't even remember who else was playing. It's like, it was that powerful. I can't remember who else was playing. It was like, wow, like it had that, it was low, and it was like low and earthy, kind of like Mel Lewis, but even lower than that. Wow. Even like almost sloppy, like in terms of the tuning, I'm saying.
Right.
His playing was still, impeccable.
It was crispy, right.
Yeah, but it was that dark, low kind of thing. It sounded like sometimes I like to compare tuning to different like cultures of our diaspora, so like when I hear that high sound, I start thinking, okay, that's some Max. You'd be thinking about that high pitch on the djembe, something Mandinka, right. That kind of thing. And then you hear like Ghanaian Yoruba stuff, like some of those drums, they have that lower kind of sound, but his sound was even lower, like just like it was wet. It sounded very wet, but it was also really warm sounding,
Yeah.
And but yeah, just getting introduced to those kind of traditions in the music and that kind of understanding. I don't know where I would be without Ellis. I mean, he really, at Ellis, one of my first, welcome back, Jeanette. How you doing?
Thanks.
I'm sorry. We lost. Oh, that's all right. Yeah. I was like, what did I say? He's like, girl, this fool on here, let me get off. But anyway, yeah, Ellis, I remember my first ever gig, my first ever professional gig. I was playing with this cat, Anthony Dowd, in Richmond, Virginia. That was my first ever gig. And Clarence had already been, I think, playing with him. But it was kind of like the big premiere gig in Richmond. But it was a tiny pond. It's not, it's Richmond. Right. But there was still some phenomenal players there, like Joe Kennedy Jr., Clarence C., there was really wonderful. And we had the school too. We had the residual of that. This cat, James Gates, who I learned a lot from. And I feel like I need to name all the teachers, but maybe I'll do that later. But anyway, so I go into this gig, and I'm like, man, I also get a call. I get an ask from Ellis to play with Milt Hinton that same night.
Wow.
And so my first professional gig, I did a concert with Milt Hinton, with That's Ellis crazy. In the first half of the concert, I'm playing drums, and then I scoot off to my first ever gig, freshman year. This is like literally in October, my freshman year in college. And so I'm playing with like an adult,
right.
Playing with the adult, and then one of our premier local adults, and it's this wonderful trio with this cat, Jim Branch is a wonderful singer, and he sang all these standards coming out of like a Johnny Hartman kind of vibe. So that, when you're young and you get exposed to that, that's precious.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, these ballads and stuff, and you're in there playing, and it's kind of like upper echelon, it's environment, but it's still got some grease on it. But then at the same time, the pianist, he loved a lot of Keith Jarrett. So it's like you'd be going out into the loose thing, and then you'd be coming back to the more down home kind of thing. And I played with Ellis that night, so it was like really exciting to me. And I got to tell you a story though, but Jason was there at that time too.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so little Jason at the age of 12 or 13, did you ever hear him back then? Jason Marsalis, when he was really young, about his playing? When
I never heard Jason super young, but
Jason is a genius. And I know that Winton has said that. And I know he is, because this kid, he sounded just like Tane when he was 12.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, and I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding.
It doesn't surprise me, because
it was,
but
this little dude. I remember. So he played the second half of the concert. So we do our little rehearsal, and I'm a college. I'm a freshman, but still, I'm in college, and this is my first introduction to this kid. I come into the theater for the rehearsal, and I'm on the bandstand. And I'm I know because I think Ellis had introduced me. Yeah, introduced me to him, and he was sleeping in the chairs. He's like, and he's laying there the whole time like this. And he's probably disgusted. Probably that's what was going on.
No,
and he's like,
no.
Trust me. No, I'm not gonna lie. Trust me. I was green, man. Ellis was giving me a chance. Jason came up in that stuff, I'm gonna give props where props are due. And so he's just like, and he gets up. Now he's okay, Jason. Come on up, Jason. Play your song. She's like, he's like playing all this stuff. It's just like, I'm like, oh my God. He's catching all the he's playing the melody. He knows where the tune is, and he's metric modulation and stuff. He's playing a ton of Tane, and it's really insane. I'm like, it's almost like, you feel a little dejected when you got a 12-year-old playing like that.
Right.
But it was real though. It was real.
Yeah.
So I did my best. I had a good time playing with Mr. Hinton. I remember Mr. Hinton saying his old line. It's like, I got shoes older than this one on the drums here. And so I had a great time playing with him. He was so supportive and playing with that kind of swing and that kind of depth and that vibe. It's like, and I'm not gonna call that old school. People say, oh, it's old school. It's like, whatever. Nah, that's real. That's here and now, because that's part of the tradition. Absolutely. And that tradition is alive and well when you treat it right. When you come at it with that kind of vibe, where it's like you are so committed to playing it that it don't matter what age it is or what's coming, what time period it is. If you play that mess right, you're going to resonate, and you're going to resonate with people. Absolutely. And so that's the thing. When you play with someone like Milt Hinton, you understand. Do not think that stuff is light. Do not, you know what I mean? And so, I just remember the review afterwards said that it was okay, but that when the second half of the concert, I'm paraphrasing, when the second half came about, and the young Jason Marsalis was on the drums, then everything came to life. So something to that effect. And I was like, oh. But I was like, cool. It is, you take it as a lesson, man. There's always someone out there that, that you can learn from, can school you,
It's true.
And it's funny because a few years ago I played with Delphio. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I can never get it right. Jason, and Jason was on Vibes. And so I'm playing drums for Jason and Delphio. So that was a lot of fun. And Jason gave me some pointers on some stuff, like some press roll kind of things, like that. Like I do it a little different. Like he manages to get more strokes into it. I tend to cheat. Like I'm coming from more of like right hand is controlling the quarter and just let the left hand drop, where he's playing a full like 7-stroke. He's starting on the left and ending on the right or something. I'm like, wow, that's clean, Yeah. But I mean, those cats from New Orleans, man, they know some drums. They know some drums. They know some history, and it's the way that it's taught too. When you look at those videos and like looking at Hurlin, and he's talking about learning from his uncle and grandfather at the table, playing with knives and forks. That's how we learned it. That's how we used to learn it. That's culture, and so those are the kind of things when you see how someone has excelled, and you like, because when I also studied with Max, and I knew Max, he was always talking about Papa Joe. So it taught me like, this is Max Roach, but he was always going back to talking about Papa Joe and those cats, Big Sid. And so it taught me that if you want to try to be as great as someone like a Max Roach, you got to check out who they checked out.
Yep.
Go back.
It's not about just starting there. You got to go further back. And it's not to say that you need to sound like someone further back. You just need to check them out and understand how Max Roach came to be.
Yep.
And then when you check out Papa Joe, you start to understand. It's like, wow, listen to all that footwork. It's like, that's some tap dance stuff. And then when you listen to his record, The Drums, you understand he was into tap dancers. That famous record of his, who Martin Williams gave me a copy of that record. He was the cat who wrote the liner notes to Shape of Jazz to Come. He was teaching at one of the camps I studied at with Max Roach. It was Gunter Schuler's Festival at Sandpoint. He was a cat that introduced me to that album, The Drums. He gave me a copy of it on cassette. That record, right, Darrian? Yep. It's phenomenal. And he's talking about all these different drummers, tap dancers, cats on vaudeville that you never heard about. It shows you, it's like how much history he had ingested and remembered. Those cats were so smart, and he was able to play back their different styles and all that kind of stuff. And it made you realize it's like he didn't just, and like he says, nothing new under the sun. He didn't just drop out of the sky fully formed. It all rubbed off on him. He was taking it in. He was listening to cats and studying them and figuring out what they were doing and trying. And yeah, you try to imitate, but you imitate so that you can assimilate and then bring it into your own,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
man. Look, you said so much just now, man. We gotta hang out so we can really get to the.
I know,
to
man. I always
to
say that we
to
don't hang enough, man.
yeah. To the Ellis. I know Jeanette's got something for you though.
Okay.
So as a vocalist,
Mhm.
I have a few drummers that I love that I call all the time, right?
Yeah.
But what would you tell other vocalists working with these powerhouses of the voice? What would you tell, and not just age, but just any vocalist from what you have learned, anything about the business, music, whatever? Because I think it's nice to hear from a non-vocalist who's worked with so many, a different perspective of such.
Well, of course, having your sound together is always, I think, the most important thing for me. Like, and that's talking with people like Benny Golson, I never really talked that much about sound per se, I think, with Betty or Abby. But I remember Betty saying that one of the most incredible things about Billy, and I'm not sure if it's, maybe you can verify this true, is that Billy kept her keys basically the same, and as her voice changed, she managed to make it fit. Yep. So that's some ingenious stuff. But one of the most powerful things that I remember hearing, one thing from Abby, and I refer back to what I said earlier, was that you pick songs based upon your personal experiences. Like, there are certain standards at certain times in your life that are not age appropriate.
Yeah,
I think that's important. I remember one time going to one of our clubs where a lot of our fellow young musicians hang out, and I heard a singer that could have, it's maybe 21 singing "Here's to Life." And it just did not feel sincere. It did not feel sincere. I've heard, and I've had, chances to work with singers that had a sound like someone, or they had so much of someone else that they had lost themselves. I think that's important to yes, you have your heroes, and yeah, you might want to try to cop a lot of their things, but you still got to have something of your own in there. Because to me, it feels a little disrespectful to go on a bandstand and do those kind of things, Like, there are a lot of parallels between us as instrumentalists and as singers, because the singers, your voice is your instrument. I think that with it being so personal, because there's no other instrument where it's like your flesh and blood is the only thing that's putting that sound out there. That's why singers tend to be, I think they have to be a little bit crazy because you're putting such a personal thing. I mean, I don't want to stereotype. I mean, it's a bit of a joke, but there's something about that, that kind of personal kind of thing. It takes so much to get up on a bandstand or perform on a stage or theater or whatever, and put that out there and then be critiqued, because you're going to feel that. I feel it sometimes. That's why I've learned, I take some of the principles when I used to work in an African dance company, was that you are present, but you don't give yourself over to the audience so much that you become a slave to their feelings.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to how Betty would just give it no matter what. Yeah. Like, we were taught, you do not make eye contact while you're performing with the audience, which is kind of like, some people say you should be making eye contact, but I have learned that, and this also goes back to, like, you look at that one person that's got the sourpuss face and you're like, what? And it can take you out of your vibe. So I can look through, or I can look around, but I tend to try to focus on what's going on in the bandstand. I don't mean to digress too much, but that personal kind of sound is really important. Picking out songs, I think that you really understand, that really mean a lot to you. I think you'll resonate more too, because it's not like I know, like one of the things, and Curtis put it into great words, like, Betty really understood drama. She really understood the drama of the music, because these are story tales, it's like scenarios, it's like scenes in a movie or a stage play that you're painting with these stories. And oftentimes what you're doing is you're allowing people to live vicariously through your emotion that you're putting out. They can feel, oh, I remember that time, or maybe one day I'll be there like that, or that kind of love, or that's, like, oh, that they loved and then they lost, that kind of thing, all those kind of feelings. So I think it's important to pick out songs that, have that kind of, personal aspect to it, and I'm not saying you can't do every, you can't just, you just have to be careful and mindful of it. Like I said, when I hear certain people doing certain things at the wrong time, it just doesn't feel sincere, and you can hear it,
Yeah.
Some people have lived and learned earlier, and that's cool.
That's true.
Some people lived and learned much later, or never.
Yeah. That's why when you hear somebody like Johnny O'Neill, it's like everything he sings, you believe it and feel it.
Yes.
You be crying. You're like, why am I crying right now?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
My mother told me from a very young age, because she's a singer, and she said, sing for your age, sing for your, your place in the world. Don't be up here 16 years old trying to sing Lush Life. You don't know what that means. It's like, unless you're a drunk, but you're not. And you say you don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And it's really important.
Yeah. I think that might be one of the reasons why Billie Holiday is so powerful, that at a young age, she had already lived quite a lot.
Yeah.
Whether it be, we got a lot of beauty from her struggles, struggles from her joy and sadness, and you hear that in her songs, it's so personal. It's like that, because she went through it. I think that Abbey too, she, like, one of the lyrics on one of her songs, is a song I played on, and it's with that's James Hurt on that record, with on that song at least, and it's Bobby Hutcherson also on that, and Michael Blue. But it's a song called "And It's Supposed to Be Love." And the first, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yes.
That first line, body slam your partner to the ground. I'm like, what? Like, it's a joyous, it's like a traditional sounding, like, calypso kind of sound, that kind of thing. That's one of the things about the Black experience. Oftentimes there's the veneer of joy on it, the music, and there's a dark or sad, or there's a struggle being told in the storyline of it. That's just who we are, and then to be a part of that, and to play on that, like I was young, and I'm hearing those lyrics and I'm thinking, whoa, and she's been through it. She had been through it, I think she had her struggles, she alluded to certain things with me about, her past, and I don't want to get into it because I think it would be too much speculation, but I feel in my heart of hearts, I understand where she's coming from, but I don't go, totally public with it,
Sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just remember that, and that lyric, and it's supposed to be love. Yep. And it's supposed to be love, so like, wow.
This is kind of leading me into my next thought. And I do want to ask you this, because as we're going through this pandemic, and, all of us had our whole livelihood shut down, which to me seemed to be impossible before this past year. Like, how do you embrace, like, the idea of perseverance, also like the idea of, like, rebuilding and starting something new, because you can never do what had already been done, especially when you have to stop so abruptly. You have to do something new. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I gotta give praise to the Lord God Almighty, just to having that strength, and my wife. I teach at Jazz for Teens, also teach Jazz House Kids, and I'm not digressing. Just give me a second here, but
take your time, brother.
Yes, time. You know how I do. I like to, it's gonna be like a good solo. You got an exposition, and then you start developing your theme and the denouement, all that kind of stuff, And but Valery Ponomarev, he's one of the fellow teachers there, and he played with Buhena, with Art Blakey, and he had this wonderful sheet, like, you were all online, of course, but he put up a PDF, and one of the statements was, the measure of a man by looking at his wife, by regarding his wife, and it's like, whatever, it'd be your spouse, whatever, whatever. It's a different world, liberal and everything. I'm cool with that. It might be your significant other, whatever, but you can see who you partner with, and that tells you something about who that person is, and I got to say, it made me feel really good when I read that, because that being together, made it a whole lot easier. It was scary, of course, but being together, and she's a musician too, and that of course helps. But that made it easier, and it also gave me a lot of time to process and think about the future and different ways of approaching things. And then with her being called upon to do certain things, I was being brought into it. So I developed other skills, or I further developed other skills around production, things like that, in terms of recording myself, recording her, recording us, recording her band, even doing the video stuff. That little video, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but that's something that I recorded in the crib.
Great.
I did the audio engineering, mixing, mastering, the video in stuff, all of that. Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's given me a new set of skills, because it's like, sometimes she's like, this promoter saying they can't bring the band in, but if we were able to do a video, they would give us, it's like not the original fee, of course, but still that's some income.
Yeah.
And it's come through multiple times throughout this. It's been helpful. Now, of course, it's not what we would normally be making, but that I'm blessed in that regard to have, she's a genius. I'm going to say it, so to be partnered with a genius like that, and that's been wonderful. Going forward, it has made me look at more like being more independent because of that, not being so dependent upon other things. And, I've made like that stuff that I submitted is stuff that I have yet to release. And that's my fault, but I've been recording, and I made a phone call, and I'll have a gig coming up at Soapbox Gallery next month. So I'm excited. Nice. Like Jeanette said, she's like, "Oh, look at you, Mr.
So happy
Thank
for you.
Yeah, a trio with Marvin Sewell and Chris Lycap. So going forward, I see that, and you can see people in our world, in our business world, that, they pull strings, they make things happen because they get out here and they hustle. Yeah. It's like, it's making me see that more. It's also made me value connections more, like in terms of like just saying hello to people. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm nice enough, but still, if you're not like even just reaching out on the phone here and there, that can kind of diminish your position, because if you we couldn't hang out in the clubs like we used to. We couldn't, that whole like, unseen, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, right, really could be a problem. And sure, but at the same time, you have stuff online, but then it was like a gazillion of those things. It was left and right. It was stuff everywhere, until a point where that also too, like, I think you have to, your lane, and some people will really thrive on that, but there's also for a certain kind of musician where it can begin to diminish, I think, their value when it's so much over and over and over and over again. I remember Betty talking about that, like, playing in certain places, like if you do it too many times, like she talked about some of the young lions that were really hot at one moment. She said they kept on going back to the same clubs too many times, and then people got tired of them. They came back too often, too soon. It's like, there's a way you have to kind of dole it out. It takes perseverance, and you got to be strong, and maybe you need some other kind of, you have to have other things in the pot ready to go, because we want to work. We love to perform. That's our greatest strength and our biggest weakness is wanting to do it. We like to do it. And sometimes it gets to the point where you're giving it away. And that's where it becomes dangerous, I think, Absolutely. So that's some of the things I think that, that's made it even more clear. Sometimes you just say, yeah, I understand we're in this situation, but right now I can't do that. It's like, I'm going to, and thank goodness for teaching. I have those kind of things also that help out a little bit here and there. And I'm very, very thankful for that. And but that's also made me a stronger musician, because, having to explain it to other people, it's made me like, oh, okay, you got to have your stuff together. And now doing it on Zoom, it's not like, I'm a good improviser, but in Zoom, you got to have your stuff lined up. You got to have your folders ready. You got to have your PDFs ready. You got to have your MP3s ready. You got to have your sounds, all that stuff, so you can present properly to the kids, And I'll spin on a dime. Yeah, I'll if I see something else we're flowing in a different direction, I'll do that. If I know I'm where I need to be with this young person, then I'll go with that, and I'll be like, okay, let me look at my library. Oh, let me get this YouTube thing up, But I have these things in my memory bank where I know I can make it happen quickly enough. But at the same time, I've learned a lot from preparation, and I think this is what COVID is teaching us all. Say, prepare, look further down the road, understand the ramifications of what you're doing. Not everybody's going to see that, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that.
Another thing about sound, though, I remember Daddy said some heavy stuff to me, and she said that a lot of the singers today have become inundated with R&B and gospel, that they don't know how to fit inside of like this genre the way she hears it, at least, So I never forgot that, because when you've gone somewhere and you hear someone singing, and it's like, there used to be this show called Star Search, where you get to do the loops and the hoops and hollers and all the circles and curly cues and everything. And that's what would get, the general kind of public excited. And I understand, play for the people. And that's it. But there's still an artistry to doing that. Like Cannonball was a prime example. He knew how to play for the people.
Yeah.
He was scientific about it. Earl Mcintyre, wonderful trombonist who, he played a lot with just all these great people, the Mingus Big Band, just a phenomenal musician. He said the story he heard was that Cannonball, he took a scientific approach to building his band and building how he's going to approach the music. He went around in all like the joints and the black clubs, and he started finding out what people were listening to, what they were checking out. And he decided to use those elements in his jazz in his music, whatever we want to call it, great American music or black music, black American music, and that's another thing. I know Abby hated that word jazz too. She did. She did not like that word. But that kind of like understanding, and it makes me think about some of these like, rap artists, and R&B cats. They go out in the clubs. They understand what's going on.
Oh, absolutely.
And they go to some of the spots that are, kind of gutter too. And they find these kind of things, and then they find a way to make it, palatable or present it to the people. Now, what you choose to do with it in terms of, is it going to be uplifting or not? That's on you.
Right.
So
no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, it's important to uplift. Yeah, absolutely.
We hitting time, man.
Wow. That was fast. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you go. It's a quick one.
All right.
But check this out. Before we go, man, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to tell the people where they can connect with you. They can buy your merch, your records.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's no records out yet. To be honest, there are no records out. The stuff that you have is a sneak peek. So what you got right there, please don't give it away.
I won't give it away.
None of that.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed looking at the. Did you? It seems like Jeanette looked at the video. Cool.
Yeah, we checked it out. I didn't realize. So the stuff you sent us is not released. Maybe we should play one thing, right? Maybe we should, if it's cool, we can play a little snippet of something real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
the 3 MP3s are those are all originals of mine. Those are all songs I wrote.
Oh, lovely.
My favorite one is Lost Lullaby. Can we listen to that one?
Yeah, man, hit it. I love it. Yeah, that's a song that Cyrus used to play. It was called a different name back in the 90s, but he used to play that as a solo piece when I was working in Cyrus Chestnut's trio in the 90s. And it's on one of his Atlantic recording sessions, sitting in a vault somewhere. But I renamed it. It's another name now. It's called Lost Lullaby because for a minute there I lost that chart. That's what happens when you move. You got stuff in boxes. Yeah.
Oh, I know all about that.
Cool.
All right, so we'll play it right now. Lost Lullaby.
Xavier Davis on piano, Chris Berger on bass.
Wow, man. See,
Yeah.
We're getting in it, right?
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that last 8 bars I wrote on the chart, that said splash grease, and clearly Xavier did that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's
That's
just
beautiful,
oscillating between 2 dominant chords in the last 8 bars. It's just like, it's a really simple song. It's not that many changes to it, but it's, it just feels like it's something I could sing, and that's how I wrote it. I was sitting at the piano, and yeah, Xavier is another one of those Betty Carter cats, and you can hear that. And he came through her band, and he played with Abbey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, was that you recorded that at your crib, or you guys?
Not that one. No, that was done at
Okay.
Tedesco Studios. That was done in 2013.
Okay. Wow.
It's that old. Yeah, it was at Tedesco Studios. But I didn't have anything to do with the mixing. I mean, I was there for the mixing and mastering,
Right.
And I did make certain choices, like being an audiophile. I've seen the loudness wars come along where everything gets louder and louder. And I said, no, can we back it down? Because it was sounding bland, like just because a lot of records to me sound bland simply because the dynamics have been squashed.
Yep.
And so I said, back down the volume so that I can hear the peaks and valleys. Like you can hear, like I get explosive towards the end, and it jumps out because it starts at kind of a softer level.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. No, I appreciate that, man.
Cool.
It's so nice to hear a trio, number one, because like you said, like just the sound, it feels so intimate yet like very powerful. But also, I know we didn't speak about your history as far as dance goes, but like dancing and playing drums, and you really sounded like what to me Gregory Hines dances like.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored.
Like as I
am
was
very
listening,
honored.
it felt so graceful.
Oh, thank you. That's my goal.
Yeah, it was stunning. Like I could see, like I could picture Gregory Hines like that felt like that. Like it did feel like somebody dancing on it. And I love that because so often you've got drummers that like just stay in the pocket and that's it, which is great. Like it's wonderful.
Yeah.
There's totally moments for that, but it's so nice to hear somebody that can dance and still stay with it and still be the back, but yet still forward. It was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that means so much because that's exactly, I mean, you put in better words than I could. That's what I mean, I love dancers. I love the gracefulness of that. And working early on with Cyrus, like it taught me a lot about that. Working with him, working with Betty with him. Like, that was, that's like, to me, is the epitome of elegance is Betty's rhythm sections, Jerry Allen, Cyrus, and that and Xavier. It's just something about, and that piano sound, when it's right. And that inspires me to play a certain way. And it's just that dancing sensibility that I always try to get to. Now, that kind of approach doesn't work with every group though, so I know there's a time and place for everything. And I knew with this song, that's why I wrote it like that, because it gives me that chance to do that. But thank you, because I love me some tap dancers. And I played on Shuffle Along. I worked with.
That's what I was just gonna bring that up because I don't know if you remember this, but Henry Conaway hooked us up for Shuffle Along. I came and I checked you out, and I was gonna sub possibly.
You came into the pit, right? Did you watch in the pit? Yes.
I watched in the pit, and I was telling Jeanette before you came on. And I was like, oh shit, man. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. I called Henry. I was like, Henry, man, this cat is on another level. And I never played a Broadway show. I was like, bro, the amount, the perfection that you played that show with was beautiful. Like I've never seen, and I've seen other cats play shows. What you did, man, I don't know if they got recordings, but this it was a masterclass. It was beautiful, man, because you understood the entirety of the music, and you have to play a show like that.
Yeah.
And up until that point, coming from New Orleans, I had never heard someone play like music from the beginning of jazz so accurately. I was like, oh shit! Like
I'm honored. What y'all stroking my ego too much here now. My wife is gonna she ain't gonna be able to handle me tonight. I'm walking by, gonna be so big, be bumping into the door frame.
No, really, man, because I was like, wow, man, this cat really like studied Dodds and Papa Joe. Like you really, and you had the bells and the wood blocks. I was like, yo, this is crazy. Like
I got videos of that. I've been meaning to put them up, man. I have so much stuff. I'm not like, I mean, I sometimes I have these spurts where I put things up, you know, on social media, but I'm not like a hardcore social media hog. Like, it's fun, but then it's sometimes I'm like, man, it's just I'd rather be practicing. You know what I mean? Right. So one day I'll put some of that stuff up, because I have some videos. I looked at it, it scared me. Even like looking at it years later, I was like, what? You know, because you get so deep into the music. But I learned a lesson talking to one of the old heads that was a drummer. And I met him one day at the theater. He was just hanging out on the street, and I forget this gentleman's name. What's this cat's name? But he told me, and I was saying, man, yeah, the drum book is really hard. But I was the one that kind of like, I basically worked on those parts with Savion Glover. So I was listening, I was following Daryl Waters' instruction about, okay, I want this here, I want that there. But then he just gave me free reign to fill in all the like, there's certain key things, you know. And of course I hear, okay, I need this. And then it's like, I'm looking at the dancers. So I had rehearsed with the dancers for 8 months prior to the show even starting, rehearsing with the rest of the band. So I knew the stuff in and out. I have like in that cabinet, I have this big thick folder of transcriptions that I did during the dance, the shedding sessions when Savion was developing it. So, and he'd come in almost every other day and change stuff. So you could see so much stuff I marked out. And I was like, okay, they're doing this, you know. It was like, I mean, it's foot percussion, you know. So I was trying to interpret that on the drum set in relation to what I'm hearing and seeing, because there's other little cues, like people dropping things, throwing a hat or whatever, punching someone, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That was, man, listen, if you need to be traveling the country giving master classes just on that. Like that, somebody, you got a doctorate in whatever that is, man. You know, I'll carry your drums, man. Just let me know.
I mean, it's a good point, man, because it's a science and an art at the same time. And that's why I love Papa Joe, because I used to, like, when I heard that record, he was talking about the different tap dancers, and then looking at videos of those cats back in the day and seeing like that one with Jimmy Slide, you know, that video with Jimmy Slide. Now, see, Savion hit me to the fact that Jimmy Slide, Roy Haynes used to hang out a lot with Jimmy Slide.
Wow.
See, things start to fit together when you talk to. That's why you're disciplined. You can't just be, I'm just going to do this. No, it's all over. Talk to artists, talk to the dancers, talk to the singers. Then you learn more about what makes what they do special. You know, what all we're doing is special. And so I was like, you know, and you can hear clearly Roy Haynes, he loves some Papa Joe. You know, he understands. He's got the humor. He's got the drama. He's got the excitement. He's got the sadness. He's got the anger. He's got the joy. All that stuff is in what we do. You know, and then sometimes there is, you know, that fire. You know, all those kind of things. You know, I remember going to the Vanguard, and I remember hearing Roy Haynes sitting right down front. A friend of mine, her name is Crystal Simpkins. We were in college together. She's a dancer, and when she came up to the city, I took her out to hear Roy Haynes, and she fell in love with Roy Haynes. This is back in the 90s. She said, I want to marry him. I was like, wow. And I believe it. And we sat right down front, and when we were going, I was taking her back to her apartment. We were coming across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I had Miles in the Sky on, you know, that record. And Tony is just shredding. And it dawned on me, I was like, this is Roy Haynes. I was like, this is a ton of Roy Haynes here. Like, because after sitting there for 2 sets, you know, hearing him at the Vanguard on the front row with our feet on the edge of the stage, you know, no, not rudely, but, you know, when he wasn't playing, at least, you know, we were that close, and we were sitting right in front of the bass drum, and we both looked like, I put it on. We both looked at each other, and I didn't crash, but I was just like, I remember her, she's like, this guy, this drummer's listened to Roy Haynes. And I said, yeah, that's Tony Williams. And I was like, wow. And I remember talking to his son years later, and he was saying, I told him, I said, man, I heard this, and my friend, she's a dancer, she heard it too, you know. And he said, yeah, I tell you, one time I was at a Tony gig, hanging out backstage, and I was talking to him. You know, Tony could be really quiet and kind of standoffish, you know. And so he didn't say that much to anybody he didn't really know that well. And so he said, and later on he said, yeah, I'm Roy Haynes' son. And Tony just lit up. He said, why didn't you tell me that, man? That was the cat. He was the last drummer I really checked out. I spent a year studying him. And I was like, golly, man. That's why it's so cool to have these different conversations, and you start to see like all these little pieces fit together to the puzzle. And it's just fascinating. It's like Tony Williams. I mean, he's one of our greatest, you know. It's like, And he listened to so much music, and there's that really great master class where someone says, how'd you come about with just such an original sound? He says, oh, I didn't see myself as being that original. I just took a bunch of different drummers things and I put them together in my own kind of way. Like, that's like, as bad of a dude as he was, and he knew he was a bad dude, he still had that kind of humility. That's what's really powerful, because some people you could come across, I think, for some as being like kind of cocky, but he still had a ton of humility, man. Those cats, like, that's the dichotomy of those different personalities. Sometimes it's not everything you think it is until you start digging deeper. You're like, whoa.
Absolutely. Listen, Alvester, man, I hate this, but we got to wrap it up. But
I love it, man. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Yeah, this is wonderful. I really appreciate
this. Amazing.
This. Yeah,
oh man, thank you so much for blessing us with all of this knowledge and the stories.
Man, thank you for doing what you do. You're blessing the scene. Thank you for anybody's out here uplifting each other. I love it. Much mad respect to you both and your whole program. The Working Artist Project is just amazing. Second Line Arts Collective. This is phenomenal. I'm so excited that you're doing something like that. I'm in awe of you guys, because I know this takes organization. That's not easy, man.
Yeah, I think this is episode 111. So
get out of here.
Yeah,
wow.
So
y'all got it going on. And one of the heaviest, I do want to leave you one quote. One of the heaviest quotes I ever remember Abby saying was, if you practice unorganization off the bandstand, you bring that same unorganization to the bandstand with you.
Uh-oh. See, with that, look.
Wow. For my whole life.
Right? Let me get my life together.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much. My name is Darrian Douglas.
And I'm Jeanette Barry.
And we'll catch